Hello, I am Miranda, and you're watching Brandanda Reviews. I am the better half of Brandanda Reviews, and today we are talking about the best of the decade. So, it is 2019, and it's about to be 2020, so it's about to be the end of the decade that started in 2010. Although, if you're like me, you don't really count New Year's or decades as the end-all be-all. It's really your birthday, which is your new year, but that's less exciting to celebrate. It's more exciting to celebrate with everybody else. So you're valid if you celebrate the new year and you celebrate the end of a decade, but I'm already 2 decades old. I'm going into my 22nd year, so it's not as exciting as everybody's putting it out to be. But whatever, I'm still going to talk about my top 10 of the decade. So, these are in no order, but these are the albums that I think most impacted me these last 10 years, which I think they're just like the albums that most impacted me in general, because I feel like the last 10 years is when I really got into music. Even though a lot of the albums that I got into are from previous decades, but doesn't matter. Anyway, number 1, again, not in order, is Air for Free by Relient K. I think that this album was a really cool album, and I feel like it was very, I was very present for it, and like very into it when it came out, which, I mean, I'd been into Relient K for a while, and I'd listened to some of their albums when it came out, but I've never been like, I went to the tour that they performed after this, and so I felt like I was very involved in this, which is always a good thing. But I think that this album especially did a lot for my kind of tone for the last couple years, and I also think that, like, as Brandon said, it was a great comeback. It wasn't them just creating something random and saying, we're here, but we're not, like, going to make an impact. I think they definitely made an impact with this album, and I think it's one of their best albums. I don't think it's their best album, obviously. If you've watched this, you know how I feel. But I think that it definitely is one of their best albums, and it is a really cool album to be coming from an artist that you didn't even think was still, alive, and they came out with this only 3 years ago, although it seems like it was sooner. But yeah, I think it was really awesome, and one of my favorite songs ever is Local Construction, and it's on that album. Also, it was really long, and that just in general is great. So it was a good, long soundtrack for that year, and also, the whole decade, I think. My number 2 is Vice Versa by Switchfoot. This is probably one of my favorite albums by Switchfoot. I can't really say that because it changes almost every day, but I think that this one kind of defined a lot of Switchfoot's career in general, but also just, I don't know, kind of Switchfoot's sound. I feel like it's very important to them because every single show that they ever have performed, they end it with Where I Belong, so it's obviously, like, something important. And I think that lyrically it's, like, the most impactful, and the most, not necessarily mature, but, you can really, like, get something out of these lyrics every time that you listen to them. And I think that Thrive is one of my favorite songs, and so it's one of the most important songs that they've written for me. And I think I might get a tattoo of it, but who knows. So, that was a really good album, and I like listening to it on vinyl. It's great. My 3rd album is Suburba, because naturally we go in the order of Relient K, Switchfoot, House of Heroes. I really like Suburba. I have a signed copy of the vinyl that I got for $10 on eBay, and it's just one of my favorites. I think that when I listened to it, I was just kind of in a high school, like, drama mindset, and so it was really cool to listen to and get that idea, and also, like, even though The End Is Not the End was my first album that I listened to by them, it was kind of, Suburba was kind of my first one that I listened to that wasn't Brandon giving me to listen to it, and so it was kind of my own that I really took on, and it became one of my favorites easily, and it kind of describes, me finding out about House of Heroes this decade and listening to it a lot. Suburba is definitely the one that describes my love for it and my coming to knowledge of the best band to ever exist. My next album, I don't remember what number we're on, I think it's 4th, is Have It All by Bethel Music. I found out via Spotify that Bethel Music was my artist of the decade, which was really interesting to me because I listened to a lot of Taylor Swift. So it's surprising that that was number 3 on my list of artists of the decade. But it was just very surprising that Bethel was number 1, especially because even when my Spotify was used at my church, they listened to a lot of Hillsong. So I would have assumed that, that playing all the time would have been the, messing up the algorithm to make it that. But I really love Bethel, and I'm really proud that that is my artist this decade because I really love all of their music, and I think that it's very important in the worship genre. But Have It All especially is a very important album to me, and a very impactful album. It's so visceral to me because when that came out, I was like, I remember my old pastor got an email about when Have It All, the song, came out, and like we listened to it, and I remember like that was like 2 weeks before the single came out, and then the whole album came out, and I don't even think it went on Spotify right away because that was before Bethel put their music right away on Spotify. And it was just a very, like, I don't know, my church did a lot of songs from it, and that was, like, when I was graduating high school, and it was just, I was very, like, present for the time that my church was, like, really into that album. And it also just reminds me of just like sitting to it and listening to it and like thinking of all the things on it. Also, that one is very long. And I think it's one of their best albums that they've ever done. I think it's a very amazing mix of all the people in their church and all of the styles of music that they can do, and all of their, I also think it has the best spontaneous songs in it. So it's just one of my favorite albums, and it's definitely a highlight of this decade. The next album is Hillsong Young and Free's We Are Young and Free. That is another one that's much like Have It All. Not less deep, but it was just kind of when I first got into youth group. This was the album where I was just like, whoa, like youth group can be fun and stuff. Not that like I haven't had fun in youth group before, but it was just kind of like what I want to do is be a youth group minister, like go into youth ministry. And so this one kind of defined that for me and made me see like, whoa, this is somewhere I need to be. And so, my youth did this a lot. My youth group did this album a lot and all the songs on this. And every time I listen to it, I just get happy and I think about my good old friends. Even if I'm not friends with those people anymore, I don't talk to them anymore, like it just makes me think of that time. And it was a really nice time, and it was really great to love Jesus and party hard and get really tired from jumping up and down. It was just a great time. My next one is Live at the Night by John Mark McMillan. This album, I think I don't know, I feel like John Mark McMillan is really unconventional, and when I learned to be and accept unconventional things like in my music, it kind of helped me a lot, like expanding my music repertoire, not repertoire, but liking, my music liking, you understand. So I think that, and I think that also like John Mark McMillan has a really great heart, and he loves Jesus a lot, and when I understood that, loving Jesus doesn't look the same in every single thing, it was really beneficial for me, and I think that this album proved that a lot, and also it slaps. So my next favorite album, I feel like all of these are worship besides my top 3, but you know what, Jesus is great, so it's fine. My next album is God That Saves by Iron Bell Music. I really liked Iron Bell Music, and I think that they have really rich and deep worship music that is really impactful, and I should listen to this album more, because I was looking back on it and I was like, wow, this album is really good. And I just remember like singing along to it, and it's great. There's nothing more I can say. My next favorite album is The Undoing by Stephanie Gretzinger. I think that this one really helped me in a lot of the songs with like my own personal struggles when I was listening to it. It kind of showed me coming from somewhere where like We Are Young and Free was like my main type of worship, where it was like loud and like hardcore, as hardcore as it can be. The Undoing was kind of showing me that it can be, quiet and just like talking to God. And I think that it really helped my conversation with God more, and led me in a way that, helped me be more open, I guess, in its lyrics and in its content. And also Stephanie Gretzinger has a heart and a voice of gold. So there's also that. My next album is Voices Volume 1, which is by a band called Young Oceans, but it's really a collective of artists that sang this album. So this one was one that I really liked. This was actually, I found this band by listening to one of Spotify's recommended playlist or something like that. It was like the recommended artists, and I just randomly listened to it one day, and I found Young Oceans, and I was like, wow, this is an interesting band. And it was kind of like meditative and like slow and smooth, and I was like, this is interesting. And then I listened to this album and I was like, whoa, this is cool. So basically they have songs that aren't necessarily congregational or worshipful, but then they got people, their friends, which like includes Leland and Evan Wickham and other people, and they had them sing these songs. And I just think that like, as somebody who was really, really into worship music when I was in high school, finding them on my own was a really impactful thing for me, because I, wasn't really used to knowing artists by myself. Like it would always be like my friends or my pastors who would tell me about them, but finding them on my own was really cool. And also just the lyrical content and the, I think, simplicity of it was also something that, coming from, I think, like Bethel, where it's like it's not very like maximal kind, but I think that Young Oceans is definitely very minimal and helped me kind of see worship in that light. And then my final one for the decade was Sing Along 2, because, as you know, I'm in love with Phil Wickham. And I also think that this album was kind of the birth of my love for Phil Wickham. I mean, I've always loved him, but it really helped me see how cool he was, and how awesome this worship music can be. And I think it also, I mean, I know they're Calvary Chapel hymns, but they also kind of showed me how like hardcore hymns can be. And so it was just a really cool album for me, and really awesome way to look back on different songs and like see how, look at worship and see how it can be just, calm and just acoustic. Because I think also, like, relating to my church at the time, it was really, we had like a long period of time where we only did acoustic worship, and it was really cool because we, broke from all of the like bells and whistles of worship and went to just like talking to God again, but also in a lot. So it was like kind of Young and Free mixed with Stephanie Gretzinger, but acoustic. So it was like very indicative of where I was at the moment. And so it was definitely an artist and album of the decade for me. And then I can't pick things. So my honorable mentions are coming next, but I'm not going to explain them. I'm just going to say them. So, Colors in Cold Hard Want, because House of Heroes rocks. I just explained it, but I'll give short explanations. Without Words, the synesthesia version of the album, and The Loft Sessions by Bethel Music. Live in Miami, Zion Acoustic Sessions, and Empires by, those are all Hillsong United. Glorious Ruins and No Other Name by Hillsong Worship, and Where the Light Shines Through and Fading West by Switchfoot are all my honorable mentions because we have a lot of love for artists and songs this decade. And I've been Miranda of Brandanda Reviews. Those are my top 10 albums of the decade. Thank you for listening, and go listen to those albums.